You see, that's why you play the game. Because you never know how it's all going to work out. You never know how it's going to end. And when it comes to IndyCar, my 9 years in Indianapolis, my 8 years of covering the Indianapolis 500, what I've learned is that everything is possible. And that even when you think all is lost, it's not the way it actually is. The sport, the race, and specifically what happens at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway at 16th and Georgetown, well, it's just different than anything you've ever seen. Guys, welcome to the show presented by Americans for Prosperity, AmericansForProsperity.org. Economic liberty, free speech is where it's at. And this is a story about economics because there's the news right there from Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing stating that because Stefan Wilson of Dreyer Reinbold Racing and Cusick Racing was injured, Graham Rahal, who didn't make the race, got bumped in qualifying. He will be part of the Indianapolis 500. Let me bring in JMV, the sports guru of Indiana from 93.5, 107.5 The Fan in Indianapolis. You and I take care of pre-race coverage for the Indy 500. We have now going on, I think, this is our 8th year or 9th year together. We've seen a lot of fantastic and fascinating things. This is a story out of Hollywood right here. Let's start with the basics. What happened to Stefan Wilson?
Stefan Wilson got in a collision yesterday with Catherine Legg. He ended up, I think, breaking a bone maybe in his back. I can't remember exactly how that went down, but he was ruled unable to drive, Tony, in the 107th running of the Indianapolis 500. Thus, Dreyer Reinbold needed another driver. And you know, there was some common wisdom out there that maybe a guy like Sage Karam, maybe a guy like JR Hildebrand, both have been in and around the track before, could be logical choices. And as it turned out, they decided to go with Graham Rahal. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. See, Graham Rahal's always been a Honda driver. Dreyer Reinbold is a Chevy engine. So they had to all come together, Dreyer Reinbold and Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, Chevrolet and Honda had to come together to allow the release of Graham Rahal to be a part of this on Sunday, starting last 33rd in the 107th running of the 500, so he could be wheeling a Chevy around and not a Honda around. So there was a lot of balls proverbially in the air here. They were juggling, but they wanted to go with somebody that had finished fourth. I think Graham Rahal finished fourth back in maybe 2009. A year ago, he was 21st. Somebody that has a little bit of, and certainly with the news that had transpired over the weekend, somebody that brings all that to the table, and their choice is Graham Rahal.
So not only do you have to get the whole Chevy Honda thing squared away, United Rentals, Fifth Third Bank, major sponsors of Rahal and Rahal Letterman Lanigan have to be okay with having the car moved over. I haven't gotten the details yet on whether or not we're going to see them on the car. Did that get worked out with Dreyer Reinbold and Cusick Motorsports?
I'm assuming all this is going to end up getting worked out. I'm assuming it is worked out by now because, you know, Graham Rahal took to social media and had a video of him, you know, racing and being behind the wheel of that. It's sad for Stefan Wilson, Tony. That's part of it that I don't think has been left out at all because Graham did allude to that. But you're sad for him because he worked so hard to get to that position. And then because of that incident yesterday in practice with Catherine Legg, he's going to be unable to. But it does go to show you this. And one thing I think Graham has done, Tony, and he did this on Sunday when he got bumped out, he showed a level of humility that a lot of people, certainly in this era, any era, really embrace. And I'll tell you something interesting. Graham Rahal is a fan favorite, but he is also somebody that takes a lot of heat, especially in this era of social media, for being a legacy whose dad won it back in 1986. And, you know, you wouldn't be on this team, you wouldn't be wheeling that car around if it weren't for your name, your last name, whatever. And there's a pocket of percentage of folks that used to say that. I thought really as of Sunday night and then Monday, everybody kind of came together and said, you know what? This is a really good dude that understands the situation. And that's where we are in the here and now. I think he won over some fans, Tony, that he may not have had going into this past weekend. So we'll see how he does on race day. But it's interesting, the dynamic, and you mentioned this at the outset. This is just Indy. This is the way Indy works. It used to be where drivers would just kind of walk around, not literally but figuratively, with their helmets in hand, waiting on something to happen. The one thing he couldn't do, and he realized that, was buy his way in.
Yeah,
You didn't want to
that's
see
true.
him punch somebody out and then buy your way in. He did not do that.
But
He
let's go.
understood the consequences,
But let's go back.
because of it,
Hold
he
on.
got in.
Let's go back just 1 second here. Talking to
Yep.
JMV from 93.5, 107.5, The Fan in Indianapolis, the voice of sports in Indiana. You've got Dreyer Reinbold that's worked with Sage Karam, that worked with JR Hildebrand. Sage Karam is doing some other work right now. These are guys that they know, but they went with Graham Rahal. Is this in and of itself a marketing move that you go with Rahal because it creates such a better story and you look good and you still needed the driver? Or does this have something to do with the fact that maybe Hildebrand and Karam, I'm not 100% sure where Hildebrand has been. Karam's been doing some cars outside of IndyCar, that maybe you wanted the guy who was the freshest, who knew the track, who had been here for practice. These guys that were nowhere. So is that the story here?
Yeah, to answer your question, that to me is it. They wanted the guy that had been wheeling around there, had gotten used to it, that had been practicing, been working with the team. But listen, they probably dig the name as well. That's nothing against JR Hildebrand. Was a corner away, over 10 years ago from winning the Indy 500 that ultimately went to the late, great Dan Weldon. And Sage Karam is very capable as well. But they went with somebody that had been working out at the track over the course of this month, and probably as a residual effect, I get, and they probably do enjoy it, the fact that they are going to get a name guy and a story, and this is going to be covered mightily, not only by you, by us right now, but by everybody else, and certainly NBC leading up to 107th running of the 500. So they probably fell in to being savvy with that choice, Tony, because all in all, they wanted him because they felt he was the best person for the job.
Well, we still got a minute or so, JMV. One of the stories that you and I are going to be discussing on Sunday, as you and I lead up to the coverage of the Indy 500, 5 hours together on air, there is a real drama in Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. The failure of these drivers this year, the only person who made it in instead of having to go to last chance is Catherine Legg. Yeah. None of those bottom three drivers for Rahal Letterman Lanigan were above 230 miles an hour in average 4-lap speed. And when it comes to Graham Rahal, it is clear he doesn't want to drive for his father anymore. There is a story here. Is this the start of Graham Rahal peeling away from Rahal Letterman Lanigan? And exactly how much soul searching does that team have to do to actually put a winner on the track?
No. A lot of soul searching, because they've been off the pace dramatically, Tony, in this month of May. And they're going to have to find something, anything, because it has been a massive disappointment. For Graham Rahal, he has been disappointed in his production as well. And there have been stories that maybe he would like to go someplace else, maybe do something different. I guess we'll find that out. But yeah, this race team is on the struggle bus right now, for lack of a better description of it. And I don't know how you end up getting off of it unless you just put together, at least one of their drivers puts together a nice performance coming up here on Sunday, because this just seems like a situation that this race team right now is finding it very difficult to get out of. I love, Tony, by the way, the story of Catherine Legg. Make no mistake of it. I think that's a great story coming back, getting into this. But yes, the overall race team is struggling right now, and it doesn't look like there's much of an end in sight. I guess we'll see on Sunday, but not much of an end in sight. And now you got, namesake of Rahal, Bobby Rahal, Graham Rahal, going to wheel it around for somebody else. We'll see if he decides to go someplace else after the year. But right now, that team is probably one of the more, if not the most struggling of teams that we're going to see out there this weekend.
What I think is interesting is the opportunity it now creates for him, that if he actually has a decent showing, and that would be going in the teens, placing in the teens, he now shows everybody else in IndyCar that the problem isn't him. It's his dad.
Yeah.
Man, that's a That's a story in itself. We'll catch that another day. JMV 93.5, 107.5, The Fan, the voice of sports in Indiana. I appreciate you as always, and can't thank you all enough for being a part of the show. Don't forget to subscribe on Rumble, rumble.com/Tony Katz. And my thanks to Americans for Prosperity, americansforprosperity.org, economic liberty, free speech. That is where it's at. Good people, that's what we do. I will catch you next time, and follow everything at TonyKatz.com.